Take a moment and picture this. April 2020. The pandemic has just begun. London's vast squares are completely empty those strange days. Everyone is stuck at home, no one outside. And it's precisely at that moment that central banks launched the largest money printing operation in history. And you were probably looking at your bank account wondering, where is my money, weren't you? I was too. In fact, during that period I was trying to re-rent my small flat in Hackney. My landlord raised the rent by 20%. I was still trying to manage my life on my old salary, and something inside me was screaming, this isn't fair. But that feeling wasn't just an emotion, it was actually the result of an economic mechanism defined exactly 300 years ago. And the name of that mechanism is the Cantillon Effect. Richard Cantillon was an 18th century Irish-born French economist and banker. Most people know Adam Smith as the father of economics, but in my view, Cantillon was the first person to truly understand how markets work and the man who got to the root of injustice, and he did it before anyone even noticed. Now I have to ask you this. Have you ever really thought about what happens when money is printed? I mean, sure, you thought about it. You said, there'll be inflation, and moved on. But the story is much darker and much more interesting. When a central bank prints money, that money doesn't instantly distribute equally to everyone. It flows first into the banking system, then to large corporations, then to asset holders, and only at the very end, after a long journey, does it reach your pocket and mine. But by that point, prices have already long since risen. This is not an abstract theory. This is a process that affects your rent, that affects the price of my coffee, that shapes everyone's real life. To understand it, we need to go back to 18th century Spain. Imagine the Spanish bringing tons of gold and silver from the Americas, the age of great discoveries. Everyone thinks they're going to get rich. But what happens? That gold goes first to the king. The king spends it on his army, the soldiers to the merchants to others. This money spreads slowly through the economy, and by the time it finally reaches the small farmer, prices have already doubled, tripled. The farmer has already lost. Cantillon observes this and says, the point at which money enters the economy determines everything. Whoever gets it first wins. It's such a simple idea that one wonders why it's ignored so much. The first time I read this at university, I said, yes, of course, makes sense, and moved on. Then years later, right after the 2008 financial crisis, I was 28 at the time. I was having lunch with a banker friend of mine in the city at one of those expensive London restaurants, and he was telling me how the bank had drawn credit from the central bank at near zero interest rates during that period, how they'd used that money to buy assets, how the stock market had exploded. And I looked at him, then looked at the unemployed people queuing outside. My chest tightened. Cantillon felt truly alive to me that day. So how exactly does this work? Let's get a bit more concrete. In 2008, the American Federal Reserve and then the European Central Bank printed trillions of dollars and euros. They called it quantitative easing. It sounds very technical, but the mechanism is this, that money went first to banks. Banks bought bonds with that money. Bond prices rose, interest rates fell. With cheap credit, large corporations bought back their own shares. The stock market exploded, real estate prices soared, and every person who already had assets became even wealthier. But what did the average worker see? A 2% salary increase, 3% inflation. Bread on the way home got more expensive. Rent went up. Cantillon had written this in the 1730s. We lived it in 2008. Now I have to ask, is this a conspiracy then? Is someone deliberately doing this? I've asked myself this question a lot, and my answer is, largely no, it's not a conspiracy, but the system is structured in such a way that it naturally produces this outcome. Central banks inject money through the banking system because they have no other mechanism. It's their tool set, and that tool set naturally feeds the wealthy first. Last summer, I went to Frankfurt for an economics conference. It was a small panel discussion, and there an elderly German economist stood up and said, the only difference between Cantillon's world and today's world is that back then they had to carry gold. Now we press a key on a keyboard, and the room laughed, but my heart sank because it was truly so. Now let's look at the irony of history, because there's a tremendous irony in this story. Richard Cantillon himself, being the first person to understand this mechanism, used it to his own advantage. During the Mississippi bubble of 1720, the man foresaw how markets would inflate, sold his shares in time, then took short positions, meaning he bet that the market would fall, and made an extraordinary fortune from it. So the man who discovered the Cantillon effect personally exploited it. I love this kind of irony. You encounter it frequently in economic history. The theorist becomes the practitioner as well, and generally does well for himself. Now I want to tell you one more thing, and this I think is the most crucial point of the subject. The Cantillon effect works not only in monetary policy, but in every kind of artificial injection. Government incentives, subsidies, tax cuts, all of these begin at one point and spread outward, and whoever is closest to that starting point always gains the most. Think of the Roman Empire. War spoils flowed first to the emperor, then to the generals, then to the soldiers, and last to the rest of the population, and prices shaped themselves accordingly. This is actually a constantly repeating pattern in human history. Whoever holds the money first, whoever is closest to the source, wins the game. Once you realize this, you look at many things in history with different eyes: why wars break out, why empires collapse, why revolutions erupt during specific periods. So what good is this knowledge to you? I can't skip this question because theory is fine, but practically, first, let me say this. When you see news that a central bank is printing money, you can now think not there'll be inflation, but where will this money go first? And where am I in that chain? This doesn't make you paranoid. It just makes you a more informed observer. Second, historically speaking, during every major monetary expansion, real estate, stocks, and other real assets have performed better than holding cash. This is not investment advice. This is a historical observation. Third, and I think most importantly, when you understand this mechanism, when you hear news about economic inequality, you can better ask the question, is this natural or is this manufactured? And that question is very valuable in political and economic discussions. Once, a journalist friend of mine who covers economics told me, if people knew about Cantillon, politics would be very different. And I think he was right. Knowledge is truly power. Now finally, I want to say this, and the video can't end without it. However dark Cantillon's theory may seem, it also contains a hope, namely, if the problem lies in the structure of the system can be changed. Some economists discuss a concept called helicopter money, the idea that the central bank distributes money directly to people rather than through the banking system, thereby distributing the first link of the Cantillon chain equally to everyone. Is this utopian? Perhaps. Is it possible? That debate is still ongoing. Personally, I see the very fact that this debate is happening as the greatest tribute that could be paid to Richard Cantillon. The thing he noticed 300 years ago is finally at the center of the agenda. If you found this topic interesting and want to explore more of these golden layers of economic history, in my next video, I'll tell you about the hyperinflation of the Weimar Republic, which is the most dramatic and most tragic example of the Cantillon effect, and seeing how the middle class was completely wiped out in a single year during that period is both very painful and very instructive. To not miss that video, I'd like you to subscribe right now and like this video. Also, write in the comments section, is there a moment from your own life during the 2008 crisis or the pandemic where you felt the Cantillon effect? I'm genuinely curious. Reading stories like these is very valuable to me, and your experience might become the topic of my next video. See you then.